All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Give me touching on the top prop bets for the Thursday night showdown between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. Let's go ahead and get into it. But first, guys, just a quick recap from the Monday night showdown that we had between the Jets and the Niners. Obviously, a very good day. If you guys took my advice, I don't really think any of the takes that I had missed. That's not really the point of showing you guys this. It's the point that on Underdog, we were making our bets because we had a slightly better edge there than on PrizePicks. Whereas something like this with Breece Hall, this would not have cashed on PrizePicks. Okay, so as always, I like to go through the game, break it down in detail for you guys, and then give you guys the best prop bets that we can make on each site. Okay, so I want to make that clear. Let's go ahead and get into this game. All right, so looking at this game, as we can see, it's going to be one of the higher scoring games for week 2 in general. The Miami Dolphins are going to be favored by 2.5 points. Now, when we pull up the injury report for the Miami Dolphins, there is a lot to get into. Okay, so let's start with Raheem Mostert. He is for sure going to be out, so we already know that. River Craycraft is out as well. Malik Washington has been ruled out as well. ODDSJAM did practice today in a limited capacity. He did not practice on Wednesday, and in the simulated practice on Tuesday did not play as well. And so the question becomes, what can we expect if HM plays? What can we expect if he sits? I think if he plays, we're just going to see Jeff Wilson just slot into the Mostert role, which is more of the traditional running back, where we're still going to see ODDSJAM kind of operate more as like a hybrid player, if you will, where he's going to get a lot of work out of the backfield. We already know that, but he's also going to get a lot of work as a receiver, guys. He had 7 targets in that game, 7 receptions as well. Now, if he sits, that's where it gets interesting. I think we're going to assume that Jalen Wright would get some work as well. I just don't know if Jalen Wright's going to necessarily be thrust into that ODDSJAM type role. I actually think we'll probably see a little bit of Jalen Waddle be used in that way in some capacity. And what I mean by that is like motioning around and stuff like that. I just think we're going to see that go with him a little bit more, but we'll probably see it spread out. I think the one player that probably benefits the most is actually Waddle in a weird sense. And then maybe we're going to see a little bit of Braxton Berrios. But with Mostert out, I do think Jeff Wilson's going to kind of step up into that role a little bit more. We'll see how much. We really don't have a good indication of this. Last year, Jeff Wilson just did not look nearly as good as what he looked like last week. And he was battling some injuries, and maybe it's just more healthy this year. And so let's go ahead and get into those prop bets that we are getting here for the Miami Dolphins on PrizePicks currently. And what we're going to see, and this is probably should be as expected, is that we're not really getting that many edges at all, okay? But we are getting a slight edge in terms of PrizePicks Underdog scoring for Tyreek Hill. So we did see on Underdog that he's being valued more at 21 for a fantasy score, and that's adjusting for PrizePicks scoring, taking the Underdog fantasy score and adjusting it for a full PPR instead of a half-point PPR. But I don't mind this over for Hill. If you looked at the game last week for the Buffalo Bills, Greg Dortch was actually able to have some success, and I think that's somewhat important because if they can replicate the success that Greg Dortch had last week with Tyreek Hill, they're kind of the same player. Obviously, that's going to be better success. And so I don't mind the idea. Like, yeah, if we are favoring an over for Tyreek Hill, it'd be over his fantasy score here at 19.5. But we are basically banking on him scoring a touchdown there. And I would say, yeah, if he gets that over, he's probably also getting his 7 receptions as well. Now, if we take a look at his game log from last year, what we will see is only 7 receptions against the Bills in the last game against them. And then in their first game against them last year, 3 receptions. So I do think that's noteworthy. But at the end of the day, that's kind of last year's data. I don't really care too much about that. Teams are different and whatnot. The one that I probably do like the most is going to be the Jalen Waddle one. If HN is limited or out in this game, I think this really does benefit Waddle the most. This is kind of like the same situation as what we had for the Niners game, where I was mentioning we have these bets that are the correct bets to make, but these bets will all be better bets if CMC is out. That's exactly what happened. That's part of the reason as to why we were able to have a big edge, because some of those prop bets were then bumped up to the correct spot with CMC being out. I do feel like that would also happen with Jalen Waddle, where if you take HN out, you're taking out a player that had 7 targets and 7 receptions last week, and that was by design. And I think Mike McDaniel will then design plays to go to Waddle a little bit more so. And I think that's important because if you look at his production, basically all of this production just came naturally with the game progression, with the quarterback reads, okay, instead of it being somewhat by design. And I do think that's big to point out. If HN is out, Waddle will probably get more work, but I like seeing that this is probably his floor. I mean, he had 5 receptions, 5 targets, caught them all, but he had 5 receptions in that game. This is also supposed to be a high-scoring game. I don't mind the idea of going in on Waddle here. And so if we're looking at this, guys, what are we noticing, though, just in general? These fantasy score lines are off on PrizePicks, especially compared to Underdog. So, like, again, on the last slide on Monday, we were seeing that this was going to be the case with Underdog, where Underdog was overvaluing, but the data was telling us to bet the unders, so we went with the unders on Underdog. It's kind of the opposite, where they're still off in the same ways as Monday, but we're being told to bet the overs. So I don't mind Tua over his fantasy score. I don't mind Jalen Waddle over his fantasy score. I don't mind Tyreek Hill over his fantasy score. My one concern here would be maybe the Dolphins are not able to establish the run at all in this game. Thus, the Bills are able to kind of tee off on the passing game and maybe keep everything in front of them better. You know, that's a big aspect that makes Miami successful, is that their run game allows them to open up the whole field in their passing game. And so if Mostert's out, if Achane's out, that could actually limit the fantasy production for Tua, for Waddle, and Hill, but that would also probably increase their likelihood to get some more receptions because they'd be shorter, easier routes. And now one bet that I just want to kind of call out to you guys would be Tua for his over rush yards. I actually don't mind this one. I think this one could actually end up being pretty solid. I'm never one that wants to be a sucker for the last 5, but this was something that when I was watching the film, I'm like, man, that was a very nice run by Tua. He was very decisive when he wanted to run the football in that game. Now, it was only one rush, but what I mean by that, it was a correct decision for him to run during that situation. And we just need that situation to arise. But he's been good at picking up as to when he needs to run the football. And then just quickly looking at Underdog, we got some rush attempts for Tua. I don't know if I would want to be betting the over here like the day is telling us. Now, it's only 53.5% likely to hit. If you want to run that out there, you can. I think I'd rather just do the rush yards if we're going to do that. That's more one that I personally like rather than what the data likes. After that, though, on Underdog specifically, we're not getting edges for Miami. So again, probably looking like more of a PrizePicks slate. Let's go ahead and jump into the Buffalo Bills. So the good thing for the Buffalo Bills is looking at their injury report, they're pretty much good to go in terms of the players that we're going to be betting on, in terms of impacting players that we're going to be betting on as well, which is good news. Now, I do quickly want to just touch on the snaps as well. Looking at the snaps, I wouldn't say it was like crazy shocking. 61% for James Cook, about right. What I was shocked by is I would have guessed Ray Davis had more snaps than he did, only 6 snaps total. And the reason I say that is Ray Davis had a couple of nice runs in that game. And he looked pretty darn explosive as well. He was someone that played well in the preseason and looked good in week 1 as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he finds himself into a little bit more of a workload. But that 61% of the snaps that we saw for James Cook, I do still think is going to be there. I think maybe Ray Davis will take away work from Ty Johnson specifically for this game if they choose to give him some more work. But we did see James Cook be heavily involved, okay? 22 total opportunities in that game against Arizona. This is expected to be a higher scoring game as well. If you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars running backs, Tank Bigsby had a pretty good game against this defense, and Travis Etienne also did as well, but Bigsby looked good. James Cook should be able to replicate that success as well. And then I do want to point out the receiver snaps. I was actually pretty shocked that Keon Coleman instantly had 73% of the snaps, and I was also pretty shocked that Shakir only had 53% of the snaps. I feel like that was a mistake for Shakir to not get like 60% of the snaps. We'll see. But one thing that didn't surprise me, that might surprise some people, Dawson Knox still was at around 50% of the snaps at tight end, 58. The thing with it is those two are actually going to be on the field a decent amount together, Kincaid and Knox. And so one of the best bets on the PrizePicks board right now is actually Dalton Kincaid to get under 4.5 receptions. This is a bet that I don't mind. I really don't. Now, sure, we look at his projection. He's right at 4.5. But Vegas is telling us that they're giving him a 53% likelihood to get under 4.5 receptions. And I think that directly correlates with Dawson Knox being on the field. We saw that last year. Kincaid really had majority of his success last year with Knox off the field. Knox looked good as well for what it's worth. I felt when basically before this year, he always looked athletic, but like in a stalky type of guy, if that makes like a big, strong type of guy. This time he actually looked like slim, fit, and like athletic in the sense that he was able to kind of move his body in the way he wanted to, if that makes sense. Anyways, I was impressed. I was impressed with Knox. I think those snaps are going to continue. So if that's true, Kincaid might not be as involved. The thing with the Bills offenses, I do think that this is going to end up being a lot like the Chiefs offense last year, where we might not know exactly which player it's going to be that is the top pass catching weapon in that offense, because they might not know who it's going to be week to week. I think obviously heading into the game, they're going to have a game plan. So if they design to have Khalil Shakir for easy bubble screens or whatnot, I could see that happening. If they want to do that with Dalton Kincaid, I could see that happening, but that's not something I directly see happening this week for Kincaid. And I do think it's worth pointing out here, like 4.5 receptions at 53% edge for the under. That's pretty good for a one-game slate. Like, we are very much trying to find edges here, and that's the best one that we currently have. Josh Allen over rush attempts, 8.5. I'm actually curious. I do want to look back at last year against Miami, see if he did this. All right, so that's why I wanted to look. Yeah, I thought I remembered him like just going off against them rushing in terms of rushing attempts last year, and that is what happened, 15 there. And we got to remember, basically in the second half of the season, something changed where they're like, all right, we're not targeting Diggs that much. Josh Allen's going to rush the football a little bit more, and that's just going to be our offense. And we did see that happen last week as well, where he had 9 rushing attempts. Now, earlier on in the season, that game was a blowout. Don't get me wrong, 48-20. He only had 4 rushing attempts in that game. So if Vegas is correct about how this game's going to go in terms of point total and also in terms of it being a close game, then that tells us that this over bet for Josh Allen probably is a good bet for us to be making. So I do like that one. One that I disagree with and one that I think would be a good bet not on PrizePicks or Underdog would actually be Khalil Shakir to get over 3.5 receptions. Now, I do find the line that we're getting on him interesting for his fantasy score. This is one where I could actually see betting the under. It's kind of a weird balancing act here. And the reason I say that is because, one, I think they go back, watch the film, and say, all right, that was probably a mistake to not get the ball to Shakir's hands a little bit more and a little bit more directly with some design plays. At the same time, I could be completely wrong about that. He had three targets only in that game, 42 receiving yards. So again, I could potentially be wrong about that, but I just don't see how you go back and watch the film and say, all right, yeah, that was the correct move. But at the same time, the only reason why he got his over 9 fantasy points last week was because he scored that touchdown, which was a great play. And so from there, are there any other good bets that we are getting that I think are decent? I don't mind Curtis Samuel to get 2 receptions. I could see him playing more snaps than what he played last week, which again was only around 17 total. It was 17 total, 27%. And I think that's partially just due to him being a little bit banged up during camp. Maybe he just didn't get as acclimated to the offense as they would want. Also, Matt Collins having 58% of the snaps, that might have just been more due to scheme against Jacksonville. And so maybe they decide, all right, we want those underneath routes a little bit more. We're going to get the ball to Shakir and Curtis Samuel a little bit more. But I mean, that's probably going to be a push. Like, he's probably just going to get 2 receptions. So don't need to go crazy with that one. Then one that I'm pretty shocked about is going to be Keon Coleman. Let's say you agree with the PrizePicks line and Vegas that Shakir under 3.5 receptions is a bet that you should be making. I'm fine with that. If you guys agree with that, that's fine. Then you should, though, be betting Keon Coleman for over 3.5 receptions. One of my biggest worries in my fantasy football season-long leagues and best ball drafts is that I was maybe not correct about Keon Coleman. 1, because of the snaps, but 2, because he did look good. He looks like he's going to be this year's Rashid Rice. Like, I literally think this offense is going to be the Kansas City offense from last year, in the sense that we probably just have one really true pass catcher that we can trust. Last year for the Chiefs, it was Rice. This year, it'll probably be Coleman. So, I don't know, that one seems like a very good bet. Again, this is a better bet on DraftKings, FanDuel, Fliff, something like that. But if you need to toss this in there to make a 4-slip bet, a 5-slip bet, by all means, I think this is a strong one for us. I do want to call out James Cook with his rushing attempts as well. Just looking at it, guys, this is one where I could see him getting the over. This is very much a game script dependent type of bet, where if you think the Bills are going to be playing with the lead, I would suggest betting the over. Let's say you're worried about Devon Achane and Mostert being injured for the Dolphins. You think the Bills could potentially blow out the Dolphins. Maybe not even that. Maybe win by a touchdown. Then I could see James Cook being someone that you're looking at. And then just jumping back into Underdog, one of the better bets that we have on this slate in general is going to be Keon Coleman for over his fantasy score of 7.35. Not the biggest edge, okay? Again, we got to account for the slight calculation difference between PrizePicks and Underdog, but essentially off by, 4.4, which is enough to give us a decent edge here. And I would say, I do think Coleman could have a big game. Now, maybe the short week gets to him. He is a younger player. Maybe he's not fully prepped for the nature of it being a short week. There's a lot that goes into, obviously, NFL game planning and everything. Maybe that gets to him. I don't think that. I'm trying to find a reason as to why I wouldn't want to bet that, a reason as to why this wouldn't work out based off of the film that we saw last week and based off of the snap counts. That's really it, guys. So I do like that one on Underdog. Maybe that's one of the few Underdog bets we can make. Any other one standing out? I was hoping like Dawson Knox. Does he have a reception total? Because he doesn't have one on PrizePicks right now. He doesn't. Still receiving yards there. If you're wanting to bet Dawson Knox over receiving yards, you would want to do it on PrizePicks. That'd be the better route to go. And I don't mind that. For what it's worth, this is Dawson Knox game log from last week. Only 2 targets, but it wouldn't be shocking to see him get like 3 catches. Just part of the game flow. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and get into the bets of the day for the Thursday Night Football game. But first, just a quick shout out to the video sponsors, which are going to be PrizePicks and Underdog. If you guys are looking to sign up for Underdog for the first time, just make sure to use the promo code 925. I'll give you a deposit match, I believe, on up to $100. Might be more than that. Just make sure to check it out. That's going to be the letters 9TO5 spelled out. We jump into the PrizePicks promo, slightly different. The number 9 and then TO5 is going to be the promo code. Get $50 instantly when you make a bet, or your first initial bet of $5. It's a pretty good deal. And if you guys have been watching this video enjoying the tools, head on over to 9to5sports.com. Use the promo code Keep Cashing to get 20% off your first 9to5 membership. You get access to those tools that I was just showing you guys. So I am just going to trust the board right now. What's telling us to bet. Again, I really like the Keon Coleman for his over fantasy scores. It's telling us to bet Tua for over 2 rush attempts. I would say if he gets over 2 rush attempts, he's going to get over 4.5 rush yards. I feel pretty decent about that. And then Josh Allen to get over 9 rushing attempts. It's a lot. It's decent. I want to show you guys another bet that I actually don't mind as well. Now, to me, guys, this seems like an egregiously low line for Jalen Waddle. Basically getting a reception in the first quarter. And if you look at his total yards for the game, it's like 63. So that's crazy. I don't really get this line. Again, especially if Achane is out or limited, I think that just benefits Waddle even more. And so then looking at the PrizePicks bet of the day, again, just going with those 3 over fantasy scores with Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. Again, not massive edges in terms of the edge rating, the edge percent, but these do correlate. Now, the issue with this bet is that they do correlate. Okay, so when I went ahead and added in Keon Coleman and also Dalton Kincaid, this shifted the payout a drastic amount. And so I would almost suggest just doing 4, or if you like one of these 2 instead, like if you like Tyreek a little bit more on this slate or Waddle a little bit more on the slate, do that instead so you're not getting that drastic payout shift that happens. Or you could just take off whichever one of these 2 you don't like as much. Then the payout shift's not going to be as crazy. But again, I think Keon Coleman for over 3.5 receptions, he should be able to get that. I decently like that one. I do like the over fantasy score more on Underdog. And then just again, I do think Shakir will be more involved, but when we're doing these 2 bets specifically, I just don't think that really correlates with him. But overall, decent slate, kind of a fun game. But that's going to be all for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the coverage. If you did, you know what to do. Give a like and subscribe to the channel. That does help out a lot. Obviously, having some success early on in this season and in the preseason for what that's worth. If you guys want access to the 9to5sports.com tools, head on over there. They're available for $10 a month. Thanks for watching. And as always, guys, let's keep cashing.